Welcome to the first in our speaker series for fall 2025 at St. Louis Community College Libraries. Our speaker today is Dr. Luke Ritter, who's an assistant professor of American history at our Forest Park campus. Dr. Ritter earned his master's and PhD from St. Louis University in history. He has several fellowships, the William E. Foley Research Fellowship, Missouri History Fellowship, and the Filson Fellowship. He's the author of numerous articles published in the Journal of American Ethnic History, American 19th Century History, Journal of Early American History, as well as the Missouri Historical Review. He's the author of Inventing America's First Immigration Crisis, Political Nativism in the Antebellum West, and the editor of American Conspiracism, Interdisciplinary Exploration. Today, he's going to talk about, and the name of his talk is How Baby Teeth Stopped Atomic Bomb Test, the St. Louis Baby Tooth Survey, 1958 to 1970. Welcome, Dr. Ritter.
Thank you. Hello, can everyone hear me? Look good? All right. Thank you to all the kind folks at the St. Louis Community College Library for organizing this event. So today, let us explore the peculiar and profound relationships between the atom bomb, mothers and milk, and baby teeth during the 1950s and 1960s. Our story begins with an explosion, not just any explosion. You are looking now at a previously top secret video of the largest hydrogen bomb the US Air Force ever detonated, taken from about 75 miles away from ground zero. Color has been added to this GIF of the original black and white video recording. On March 1st, 1954, the team in charge of the nuclear test program on the Bikini Atoll stood in awe for a brief moment, then they panicked. It was later determined that the blast carried an unexpected explosive yield nearly 3 times what scientists had predicted. The mushroom cloud spewed radioactive particles into the upper stratosphere. The US Navy suddenly evacuated hundreds of natives from islands within 100 miles of the blast as contaminated fallout descended from above. But it was too late for at least 28 Americans and 236 Marshall Islanders who died within a short period after exposure. Here is how such a blast would look, superimposed over the city of St. Louis. Most of St. Louis would be reduced to rubble. Here is how the same fallout cloud from one Castle Bravo-sized bomb would look superimposed on the northeastern United States, among the most heavily populated areas in the country. Absolutely horrifying. About 80 miles away from ground zero, a crew of Japanese fishermen happened right into the path of a concentrated dose of radioactive debris, and the tragedy made international news. So above ground atomic bomb tests between 1952 and 1962 inspired a generation of Americans to think more critically about the unintended consequences of unleashing dangerous man-made chemicals and radioactive nuclides into the environment. Women played an especially prominent role in raising ecological awareness. In 1958, a group of activists in St. Louis created one of the 20th century's marvels of grassroots environmental science, the Baby Tooth Survey. A dedicated group of scientists and citizens collected about 320,000 baby teeth from across the country for analysis in a lab at Washington University. It's an amazing story. Today, I will briefly mention some elements, though I am no chemist. In the chaos of a nuclear blast, uranium, 92, plutonium, 94, iodine, 53, strontium, 38, and other elements are violently ripped apart, or in the event of a hydrogen bomb, fused together, creating new radioactive versions of elements, some of which had not existed on planet Earth before the first atomic bomb test on July 16, 1945. Strontium is a relative of calcium, which exists nearly everywhere on Earth. Calcium does, though calcium is much more common than strontium. It is stable with 38 protons, which is the number fixed on the SR on the periodic table. When bombarded by neutrons during a nuclear explosion, some amount of strontium becomes strontium 90, meaning it has extra protons and will undergo radioactive decay until eventually it returns to its stable state, which is strontium 38. Now, since about 1950, the US government has monitored certain metastable radioactive isotopes resulting from a nuclear explosion. This is what we call fallout. Nuclear fission occurred in a runaway chain reaction for the first time with an enriched plutonium core at the Trinity test in Alamogordo, New Mexico. Nuclear fission occurred again with an enriched uranium core at Hiroshima, August 6, 1945. The results were devastating. 4 square miles of a densely populated city leveled. At least 70,000 people died as a result, maybe more. The new Oppenheimer movie accurately depicts scientific director of the Manhattan Project, Robert Oppenheimer's opposition to building a hydrogen fusion bomb. He refused to help, so Hungarian-American physicist Edward Teller led the project to build the so-called super. Nuclear fusion occurred in a runaway chain reaction for the first time in the Operation Mike Shot in 1952 on the Marshall Islands, yielding 10.4 megatons. And then again, in our opening story, the Castle Bravo shot of 1954 yielded 14.7 megatons, making this the largest nuclear weapon ever tested by the United States. So it's hard to wrap one's head around the magnitude of the power unleashed by a hydrogen bomb. Here's one way to think about it. There are 1,000 kilotons in a megaton. There are 1,000 kilotons in a megaton. The Hiroshima bomb was 15 kilotons. The Castle shot was 14.7 megatons, meaning that the yield was equivalent to exploding 980 Hiroshima-sized atom bombs simultaneously. Here's another way to think about it. This single H-bomb yielded more explosive power in one shot than all of the weapons used by all of the armies during World War II. It was as if a part of the sun suddenly appeared on the Earth's surface. The center of the fireball reached 180 million degrees Fahrenheit, which is actually 4 times hotter than the sun. Nothing within a 3-mile radius survived, not even insects. Everything was melted, vaporized, or instantly transformed to carbon. Then the mushroom cloud spewed millions of tons of debris into the upper stratosphere, about 25 miles high, expanding to 100 miles wide. Okay, so during nuclear explosions such as this, various elements are churned up, bombarded by neutrons, torn apart, and refashioned into radioactive versions of themselves. Some are more concerning than others. Very few measurements of the Trinity test focused on fallout. Scientists have had to create novel experiments to guess just how much radioactivity New Mexicans were exposed to after the first atom bomb blast. Testing picked up in Nevada in 1951, and at that time, scientists began to worry about Americans' exposure to radiation on the mainland. Scientists tracked fallout across the United States by collecting measurements at numerous locations following a detonation. They knew then, and they know now, that hundreds of millions of Americans were exposed. The question remained, were small doses of radiation harmful? Early fallout studies focused on the radioactive isotope strontium-90 for two very significant reasons. Okay, strontium-90 has a much longer half-life, about 28, 29 years, than many of the other radioactive substances in fallout. This means that strontium-90 will emit doses of radiation for the length of a human lifespan, diminishing its radioactivity by half only every 29 years, which ties into the next point. Strontium-90 follows the normal pathways of calcium into the human body. Strontium is a relative of calcium and is found nearly everywhere calcium is. In utero and early infancy, children absorb large amounts of calcium and strontium to build their bones. This is why the Atomic Energy Commission conducted a massive analysis of milk supplies from various regions in the United States. The Atomic Energy Commission theorized that strontium-90, which shot high up into Earth's stratosphere after tests, could circle the world before falling invisibly to the Earth. Strontium-90 particles could then easily be absorbed into vegetables in the soil, including the plants that cows eat. Strontium-90 collects in cow's milk. In the 1950s, cow's milk was Americans' #1 source of calcium, and so it followed it might also be their primary source of this most dangerous radioactive isotope. Just how much strontium-90 got into Americans' diets? Could it cause bone cancer, leukemia, deformities in infants? Willard Libby, director of the AEC, did not have ready answers. Since the AEC did not wish the public to panic or the dairy industry to take a dive, they conjured up the most non-threatening name for their fallout study that they could think of. They called it Project Sunshine. The Atomic Energy Commission selected the mid-continental city of St. Louis as one of the sites of the original Project Sunshine studies in 1955. Widespread concern in the city escalated when the Public Health Service's data revealed that the city of St. Louis was a hotspot, or an area with a relatively high amount of strontium-90 in the milk supply. The early data from 1955 showed that the concentration of SR90 per liter of local milk, or sunshine units, had increased in direct correlation to ensuing nuclear bomb tests. Journalist for the Post-Dispatch, William Wyant, noted that by the summer of 1959, strontium-90 had become a household word in St. Louis. Right from the beginning, St. Louis women protested dangerous atomic bomb testing. Women's predominant role had a lot to do with the prospect of contaminated milk. Women, after all, were the primary caretakers of young children in the 1950s. Cow's milk had supplanted breast milk as the primary source of nutrients for infants. So many activists came forward as mothers who were concerned about the health and safety of their children. By the way, that's a Geiger counter. This mother is pointing at a bottle of cow's milk she hopes to feed to her hungry infant. A former president of the St. Louis chapter of the League of Women Voters, Edna Gellhorn, pronounced, "Women agreed that they do not want children to suffer in an experiment to find out how much strontium-90 the human body can tolerate." Mrs. B. Sherman founded a group with a straightforward name, the St. Louis Women's Committee for Ending Hydrogen Bomb Tests. Some also knew them as the Eves Against Atoms. Bonnie Hart, mother of three, earned the moniker Atomic Lady for her relentless activism against nuclear weapons testing. The Office of Civil Defense of St. Louis at the time issued a family handbook with tips on how mothers might prepare for and survive a nuclear blast. These are fascinating documents. Bonnie Hart reported the contents of the Office of Civil Defense literature. Quote, "The understatement of the problem of surviving a nuclear war is so general and complete that it is almost sinister," Hart wrote in one widely disseminated newspaper article. She cited several absurdities, including their suggestion to just, quote, "use water to wash the radioactive particles away." For Hart, this sheer nonsense indicated, at worst, a deliberate deception engineered at the highest levels of government, and at best, a complete lack of awareness of the impact nuclear fallout would actually have on the broader environment. For this reason, she forbid her daughter, Holly, to participate in the duck and cover nuclear bomb drills at their local school. Hart also made her daughter drink powdered milk. In spring 1958, the Nuclear Women of St. Louis organized one of the nation's most prominent environmental awareness groups to date, the Greater St. Louis Citizens Committee for Nuclear Information. The Committee for Nuclear Information was unique in American history for two significant reasons. For the first time, it brought together qualified scientific experts and everyday citizens to investigate socially relevant environmental matters. And women played an unparalleled role in forming and directing it. Precisely for these reasons, anthropologist Margaret Mead dubbed CNI, quote, "a new social invention." The first steering committee, led by women, elected biologist activist Barry Commoner, a professor at Washington University, as the organization's first president. Commoner later made an unsuccessful run for president of the United States. The Committee for Nuclear Information's most important endeavor was the baby tooth survey. Now, think about this. In 1958, 10-year-olds, for example, contained a record of strontium-90 uptake in their deciduous teeth, which had formed in utero and early infancy back in 1947 or 1948, precisely during the opening years of atomic bomb testing. In 1959, a 10-year-old contained a record of strontium-90 uptake in their deciduous teeth from a year earlier. From a year later, and so on. So collecting teeth from children across time could provide a map of strontium-90 uptake from year to year. The Public Health Service awarded several large grants to the Committee for Nuclear Information to fund a world-class lab at Washington University School of Dentistry in cooperation with the School of Dentistry at St. Louis University. It included a massive shield Geiger counter capable of precisely measuring radioactivity in teeth between two 250-pound steel plates, each carved right out of the hull of a decommissioned World War I battleship. Executive directors Louise Rice, then Yvonne Logan, relied heavily on the efforts of volunteer women to spread the word. And that was a vital accomplishment because the scientific advisory group required an estimated 50,000 deciduous teeth per year. Children who donated their teeth to science were asked to fill out a simple form identifying their residential background and age. In exchange, they became members of Operation Tooth Club, complete with an official certificate and a shiny button featuring a smiling child with a missing tooth. Their media campaign targeted children in broadcasts on local children's television programs, including Captain 11 Showboat, Romper Room, SS Popeye, and Wrangler's Cartoon Club. In 1960, Mayor Raymond Tucker even declared the week of April 18 Tooth Survey Week. Any child with a wobbly baby tooth is a person of consequence in St. Louis, Missouri, announced Newsweek magazine that year. Teeth started trickling in at the beginning of 1959 from all over the world, even though the baby tooth survey initially sought teeth from within a 150-mile radius around the city of St. Louis. Then came a deluge. In just 4 years' time, Sophia Goodman announced, quote, "We have collected 127,000 teeth to date, mothers and children accepted as part of the tradition, like the tooth fairy." It enamored children that adults thought their wobbly tooth was special. There was something giggly, profound, even empowering about the thought that their little tooth could help an adult scientist in a lab coat make important discoveries about nuclear bombs. Little did they know their tooth was destined to be ground up into a powder and mixed in with a sample size of 40 or so other teeth. Many children wanted to send in their teeth with a personally crafted letter, like so. "Dear Science," wrote Kathy. "My name is Kathy. This tooth came from my upper left bicuspid. Please send me a badge. Love, Kathy." You can see where she taped her tooth to the letter as well. "Mom says you need my tooth for research," 7-year-old Tim Wilson of Carmi, Illinois, wrote in. "This is my tooth. It is cute. Do you like it?" asked the commoner's 6-year-old son, Freddie, when he donated his tooth to science in 1959. Some mothers told their children to write the tooth fairy a special note and place it under their pillow with their tooth. Once in full swing, the CNI and its tooth survey became a model for science-based public awareness campaigns and women's activism in general in the US and around the world. It inspired many other baby tooth surveys worldwide, including in LA, New York, Montreal, Berlin, and Tokyo. On October 30, 1961, the Soviet Union detonated a huge bomb. In fact, the largest bomb ever detonated with a yield of 50 megatons, or 1,570 times the explosive force of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. According to American and European geological seismographs, its quake registered as a 0.5 on the Richter scale. Aftershock reverberations from the blast traveled through the entire Earth 3 times. Radiation detectors spiked, not only in Eastern Europe, but even in the United States. Countless Russians and Eastern Europeans were exposed. to probably dangerous levels of fallout. Russia never conducted a follow-up study. We will never know how many died as a result. In response, on November 1st, 1961, a coalition of 50,000 self-proclaimed housewives went on strike in 60 different cities around the country. Marchers protested nuclear weapons in downtown St. Louis. Some of them brought along their children in baby carriages. A couple mothers donned, quote, a placard shaped like a milk bottle and topped with a skull, reported the Post-Dispatch, with the caption, milk, death, disease, deformity. The Committee for Nuclear Information had proven that very year, in 1961, in a peer-reviewed paper, a direct causal relationship between the increase in nuclear weapons tests and a rise of levels of strontium-90 in American children. Of course, the question remained if these low levels of strontium-90 measured in children could lead to significant cellular damage over time. The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, which was the closest the world ever came to World War III, in my opinion, and intensifying activism forced another congressional hearing on nuclear fallout in August 1963. Now, at that very moment, the Baby Truth Survey's long-awaited results arrived. The Committee for Nuclear Information informed the Congressional Atomic Energy Committee that, based on recent samples, 12 out of every 3,000 children residing in certain counties in Nevada and Utah were likely to contract thyroid cancer. This report was based on a convincing study that matched levels of strontium-90 and iodine-131 in the milk supplies of certain counties in Nevada and Utah, levels of strontium-90 in teeth donated from children in those counties, and measurements of radioactivity taken by scientists in those counties after nuclear weapons tests. So, here was an unprecedented level of corroborating evidence, presenting findings from 3 independent measurements. The levels of fallout were also measured at levels that even government scientists agreed were potentially harmful. Quote, the St. Louis Committee report is the first to assert, reported the New York Times, that radiation exposures have reached levels at which there is general medical agreement that physical damage would result. In addition to hearing testimony from St. Louis's Committee for Nuclear Information, Congress also heard from members of Women's Strike for Peace. Their official statement addressed Congress on behalf of all, quote, American mothers and demanded, quote, a nuclear test ban at once. President John Kennedy signed just such a test ban on August 5th, 1963. Now, in retrospect, we have learned that Kennedy's team had been closely tracking the results of the baby tooth survey. Kennedy even called up Director Louise Rice at her residence in St. Louis and discussed the issue for at least an hour. Her 5-year-old son, Eric, remembers answering the phone and hearing Kennedy's voice on the line. Hello, this is John Kennedy. Can I speak to your mother? He didn't think much of it at the time, but he does remember that the meatloaf was cold by the time his mother returned from her long phone call to the dinner table. The ban effectively ended above ground nuclear weapons tests after 1963. It was probably a good thing too, because one CNI scientist later estimated that if nuclear testing would have occurred at the same rate over the next 3 years, there would have been a 100-fold increase in strontium-90 absorption by St. Louis 1-year-olds. Above ground tests ended after 1963. The baby tooth survey continued until about 1969, when scientists felt satisfied that strontium-90 levels in children born after 1963 had universally decreased. The data clearly fit their theory. Nuclear weapons tests led to an increase in strontium-90 in children, spiking in 1963, 1964. Once open air testing stopped, levels of strontium-90 decreased and would most likely continue to decrease. Of course, both the United States and the Soviet Union continued to build their nuclear arsenals. During the 1980s, it has been estimated there were over 60,000 nuclear warheads in American and Russian stockpiles. Now it's estimated there are about 15,000 functional nuclear warheads in stockpiles worldwide. The US currently has about 1,400 active nuclear missiles ready to launch. The Soviet Union has nearly 1,600 ready to launch. Nuclear weapons continued to be built and tested underground in cement pools, although even these tests ended around 1990 as both sides realized that ensuing fallout could never be fully contained. To my great surprise, I discovered 3 years ago that the story of the baby tooth survey turns out to be far from over. The Radiation and Public Health Project in New York recently acquired nearly 100,000 of the baby teeth donated by people born between 1955 and 1964. Many of those teeth derive from St. Louis residents. Washington University had been holding them in an obscure storage facility for like half a century. And a team at Harvard University received a grant to analyze these teeth and match the results to extant health records. So think about this. We can finally determine whether exposure to nuclear fallout at a young age has had long-lasting health consequences. Very rarely do we get the chance to conduct such a long-term study with physical bone matter. The Harvard team is also measuring levels of heavy metals in the teeth. One preliminary study dated to 2011, managed by the Radiation and Public Health Project in New York, tracked down the baby teeth of 97 people diagnosed with cancer. Then they selected 194 control teeth. So they randomly selected 194 teeth. The study found significantly higher levels of strontium-90 on average in the teeth of persons who died of cancer versus the control teeth. So this isn't conclusive, of course, but it is suggestive that there might be an important relationship to discover there. Now, in collaborating with the director of a new documentary on the subject titled Silent Fallout, I have met many of the original donors to the baby tooth survey. Just a few months ago, I attended a feature showing of the new documentary on the subject at the Missouri History Museum, and I met several people in the audience who told me they had donated their baby teeth to the survey when they were children and have since been contacted by Harvard University to complete medical surveys. And I told them to fill out the survey, please. This information could prove vital. Since that time, I have also been contacted by people via email telling me that they are also currently participating in the Harvard study. And I would say if there's any of you in the audience who have received that letter from Harvard, please participate in the survey. Your information will prove absolutely vital. Just a few weeks ago, I recorded a Zoom call with Mark Weisskopf, Dr. Mark Weisskopf, the director of the Harvard study. And he told me a bit more about what they found regarding Coldwater Creek. I know that just made the news. The gist of it is that St. Louis residents who lived near Coldwater Creek, a site where there might have been leaking of radioactive waste, were more likely to contract cancer. So now he's looking at ways in which they can expand their approach and perhaps pull in different independent measurements to put together a robust picture of to what degree St. Louis residents have been exposed. Now, this story has a little bit of everything that people find interesting. A broad cross section of society applied rigorous scientific methods to an area of environmental concern. They raised public awareness, and against all odds, they convinced governments to stop detonating nuclear bombs above ground. Thanks to those who donated their teeth back in the 1950s and 1960s, scientists are currently able to study the long-term overall effects of potentially toxic materials on human health. We may yet discover that the group of scientists and citizens who created the baby tooth survey in St. Louis saved not just thousands, but millions of people across the world. Their contribution may yet still yield life-saving discoveries. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ritter, for such a fascinating story of St. Louis history. Does anyone have a question for Dr. Ritter? You could put it in the chat or you could ask him verbally. I've got one to start with. In addition to children, were any livestock studied at the same time, kind of concurrently with children, like cows?
Yes.
Okay. Hello. So I love all the hearts. Thank you. It's like makes me feel really good. I just saw like a wave of hearts coming at me. It's so great to see everyone here, and I'm happy to field questions. So to answer that question, in terms of studying animals, no, I'm not familiar with any tests done on animals. The gist of it was they collected the cow's milk and they measured amounts of strontium-90 in the cow's milk. So they could deduce from that yeah, I mean, cows were imbibing strontium-90, and a lot of it was getting into their milk supply. In terms of the effects that had, like the health effects that had on cows, I mean, no studies have been done on that. And that's the hard part, isn't it? To look at the actual health consequences of levels of strontium-90 in the human body or in any mammal for that matter.
Right, you have to wonder, did the dairy cows suffer? They were just the transmission method, or did they suffer adverse health effects too?
Right.
I wonder too, if, say, someone who did donate their teeth in the 60s, if there was or there's probably a way to look at our bones now to see if there's still strontium 90 or if it had decayed in our bones uh, currently.
Well, right. That's it has decayed quite a bit. So we talked about how the half-life is 29 years. Dr. Weisskopf assured me, however, that they do have techniques available to measure strontium 90 levels, even at a lower level. That has been reduced, obviously, since the 1950s. So it can be done. But testing like human bone matter, it's very hard. It's very invasive, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's got like stick a needle in there and like get a sample of the bone and everything. So that the baby teeth, that's what's so brilliant about them, is that you have physical bone matter and it's not so, harmful to people to study it.
And I've got some chat questions. Did the general public understand at the time how dangerous the food supply was?
The the environmental moment of the 1960s raised a lot of people's awareness about the potential, health consequences of imbibing these man-made chemicals and other toxic materials. People were just starting to learn in the 1950s how small little invisible chemicals can get into food supplies and actually have a long-term negative consequence. People became enlightened about this subject, strontium 90, more familiar with the negative health consequences of radiation in general. They became more aware of like pesticides and how that also could have a negative health consequence. And so you start to see at the end of the 1960s increased levels of awareness, even environmental regulations are meant to address these things. So I think the answer is, I mean, these people we're looking at who started the Baby Tooth survey, they were right on the cutting edge of investigating that. And by the end of their study, I think there had been a real transformation in American society where people were more aware of the potential harmful consequences.
Here's another question from the chat. Are all the teeth located at Harvard now? All the ones that remain?
Okay, so about, I think it's like 20 years ago, the Radiation and Public Health Project of New York contacted Washington University and arranged for all of the teeth to be moved from Washington University to New York. They cataloged the teeth. They have all of the records of like who contributed the teeth and the year of their birth and where they were from, which is how, if any of you have been contacted by the study, that's how they have your name, is that it was given with the initial information of the baby teeth. So they have all that. And then they have handed over a certain amount to Harvard to study. Okay, so I think Harvard has like maybe 5,000 teeth right now or something. They started with teeth that they started with the teeth of people who unfortunately have died. So they looked at death records and matched them up to 5,000 of the baby donors, and they've started there. Um, and this Coldwater Creek study didn't involve any teeth. So it's just getting started. I mean, we're going to see a lot more coming out from this study over the next decade or so, because many teeth have not yet even been examined.
Here's another question. How did they see the connection to Coldwater Creek? Did they know about the creek or did a pattern develop?
So the Coldwater Creek connection is sort of a newer development. It's not something that people were privy to back in the 1950s and 60s. However, recently, I think around 2000, there are certain groups within St. Louis that began to complain of increased levels of cancer in this community around Coldwater Creek. And so some original researchers pointed out that there could have been leaking of radioactive waste associated with the Manhattan Project near certain landfills in the creek. And so the whole thing is, we need a lot more research on it. But what Mark Weiskopf's study showed was that indeed there is this correlation that people who lived closer to Coldwater Creek were more likely to contract certain forms of cancer. And so he was able to do a sort of sociological study in that regard. But much more work needs to be done. I don't know if that answered the question, but
Here's another question. Since this was very fascinating, I work in the dental field and teach dental hygiene with STLCC and found this to be so cool. Our teeth can tell us so much about our body and our health overall. So it is so cool that they look to study the baby teeth. I also grew up outside the Naval Weapons Station at Camp Pendleton Marine Corps Base and know that they had a bunch of cows on base as an early warning sign for any radiation leaks from the underground weapons bunkers. So more cows as canaries in the coal mine almost.
how about that? I would have thought they'd use radiation detectors instead of
Low
cows.
tech, low tech.
That's pretty low tech, yeah.
It said, could the recent massive cuts to regulations make it something that like this would happen again?
I I mean, yeah. I mean, anytime you're talking about a decrease in grants available, you're going to see a decrease in science. The Harvard study received a major grant from the federal government for this project. And so, yeah, I mean, they're looking at the possibility that funds could be cut or not renewed over the ensuing years, which will just extend this whole process and make it harder to get science done. I mean, so yeah, it's competing for grant money is always it's always a complicated process, and you would like everything to be fully funded, but sometimes other projects get priority over ones that you like. But hopefully, we'll keep working in the right direction on this one.
Another question alludes to that too. Have Trump's cuts impacted the grants for this to Harvard?
I don't know the answer to that question directly. I can say that Mark Weiskopf, who I talked to just a few weeks ago, and his team are still working on this. So they still have money right now. He didn't say anything about his grant money getting cut. So I can't speak to that.
Another question, I donated a tooth, took the questionnaire from Harvard, and I'm wondering how Harvard developed the questions. To me, the questions were vague.
Oh, so okay, so Harvard sent out these surveys for people to take, and what they're doing right now, my understanding is they're asking people to self-report any sort of medical conditions, first of all. So if you have some sort of medical condition, they ask you to state what it is. The next step is for them to get documentation to prove that the condition you say you have is indeed something that's been diagnosed. And that's going to help them match things up. Another thing they're doing, and this might be the part you're talking about that's confusing, is that they're trying to measure cognitive capacity in in the people who donated their teeth to see if there's any correlation between levels of heavy metals in teeth and cognitive decline, basically. So I don't know if any of you have done that, but they have this whole like cognitive test they ask you to take, and I guess that might feel a little confusing to some people.
Yeah, I wonder how you could separate it between cognitive tests for someone, these individuals would be in their 60s and 70s now,
Yeah,
versus what is it the result of normal aging, wear and tear, or strontium 90?
yeah, right.
Any other questions for Dr. Ritter? Here's one. What to you are the most surprising or moving things you've taken away from researching this topic?
Um, I guess um, there's a lot of cynicism going around these days. Um, when I study this group of people, I feel inspired. It's an example of how um, little people um, on the peripheries can cause, dramatic change at the national and even international levels. Um, Sometimes all it takes is a little organization and strong scientific results, to make change. And so I'm inspired by that. I mean, I don't know what we would have to do for the equivalent of that today, what that would be. But this is at least an example of that it can be done.
Another viewer says, I have done that. It was round 2 of questionnaires, I think. I did a battery of cognitive tests. Will the cognitive tests continue, do you think, for as we all age?
I like your word there, battery of cognitive tests. Yeah, someone told me that it was sort of tedious answering these questions. So here's what's going to happen. If you agree to help them with their study, they're going to keep asking you to continue to take these cognitive tests. And what they're trying to do is to contribute to this longitudinal study and to track your cognitive capacity over time.
Any other questions for Dr. Ritter? We have a few more minutes. Okay, Dr. Ritter, thank you so much for your time and your presentation today. We really enjoyed it and learned a lot about St. Louis history.
All right, thank you.